What's up, everybody? It's me, the other Wing Chun guy, Topher. Glad you all came back for episode 3. Sorry about no episode last week, but recording issues and things like that. Unfortunately, it's going to happen when you're a one-man solo show. A little bit of housekeeping for everybody. I am going to have a special guest in my next episode who wanted to interview me. So who that person is, what we're going to talk about, that's all going to be a surprise for the next episode. So please tune in for that. I do know that the topic is going to be about me. Uh, what goes on, I have yet to know. They came up with a whole slew of things, so we'll get into that next week. Um, I am officially on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Check out the podcast there. YouTube for the video. Audio can be just on either of those platforms I mentioned earlier, SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes. Just look up That of the Wing Chun Guy podcast, and there I'll be. Um, so this week's topic was actually brought up by AJ from the Martial Arts Mania podcast. He messaged me on the back end that he was interested in trying out some Dit Da, or Dit Da Jau, fall hit wine as it translates. So I figured, you know what? Let's do an episode on Dit Da. I have been an avid user of Dit Da uh, pretty much since 2005, 2006 when I first learned about it. And when I first started training Kung Fu and doing all the conditioning, especially in the Northern style, it's a hard, muscular style, um, a lot of arm conditioning and things like that. Sifu at that time, in the SEMO, she recommended, oh, put this Dit Da on it. She had some Dit Da there. Um, the Dit Da she provided for me at that time was just like a commercial brand Dit Da that she happened to have. She, though, herself was actually quite good at making Dit Da. Um, so what is Dit Da? What are the different kinds and different types? What goes into it? Uh, I'm going to try and tackle all that today. Now, let me caveat this with saying I am not a medical professional. I am not a licensed doctor. I am an avid Kung Fu practitioner who has used a lot of Dit Da. My Sifu taught me a lot about Dit Da, how to apply Dit Da, how to do Dit Da massage, and how to make Dit Da. Um, but outside of that, I am not a medical professional. Uh, and to be fair, um, I have found Dit Da to be effective in my personal use. There's a lot of still a lot of question behind Dit Da, how does it exactly work, and things like that. And I'll get to that a little later because there's actually been some interesting scientific research done on it. So, let me start by what is Dit Da, or what is fall hit wine? It is an external use ointment, generally used for bruising, things like that. Generally, when the body is conditioned for trauma, for hit. If you're like me, you use the wall bags. You might put a little Dit Da on your knuckles after you're done training. When you do a lot of chi sao, things like that, your arms are going to clash. You might hit, especially if you're cutting tools and stuff like that. You might get some bruising on the arms. Well, you can apply Dit Da to it. It's again, it's an external use ointment for bruising, and it helps the skin recover, helps the muscle and the bone and the density and all that's supposed to recover. Um, some styles like Iron Palm are avid Dit Da users. They'll do the Iron Palm training and they'll put the Dit Da on it to accelerate the healing process, and they'll go back to training more Dit Da. Same thing, in Wing Chun. Not every single person in the Wing Chun world uses it. Some do, some don't. My Sifu was an avid Dit Da person. He made Dit Da himself. Um, we have records of Dr. Lung Jan having Dit Da formulas. He was a doctor. So Dit Da is a very basic kind of part of traditional Chinese medicine. A lot of people make Dit Da, and they make it for a lot of different reasons. So you'll find Dit Das out there for general public use, and then you'll find Dit Da formulas out there for martial arts related use. In fact, a lot of Kung Fu styles have a specific formula to their Dit Da because it's their formula for their style for the specific things that they train. So if it's like tendon, they might have a very tendony based Dit Da that they want to use. Some are very muscle, bruising, bone, things like that. So there's a lot of different brands of formulas and recipes out there for Dit Da. For instance, I have my Sifu's recipe, which he kind of geared towards martial arts, general martial arts training, general conditioning. He had some others, but the recipe I have is the general. If you're trained Wing Chun or any kind of martial art, a basic recipe, um, good for that. Dit Da takes time to make, though. It is not something that you can just throw together and it's good to go. It needs to sit and it needs to kind of cook or ferment or stew in an alcohol substance, usually a clear alcohol between 40 and 70 proof. Some would say 70 proof's a little too high. My Sifu did not like to really go above 70 proof because he said that at a higher proof than that, it actually destroyed some of the herbs and elements in the Dit Da and made it too hot. This is, he liked to say, it makes it too hot, it's no good. Um, so, generally, you'll put your herbs and stuff into a vat with your choice of clear alcohol. A lot of people use some type of rice wine or vodka, um, things like that. It'll kind of soak in the herbs and it creates a brownish liquid, which is the Dit Da Jau, the fall hit wine. Now, like I said, there's a lot of recipes for that, and with the different recipes come different lengths of time. Generally speaking, a good Dit Da, um, from what my teacher told me, should be about 6 months in the jar. At 6 months, you can use it and it'll be all right. Personally, I wouldn't use a Dit Da that hasn't been cooking for at least a year. I think a good year, those are the best Dit Das I've ever used, are the ones that have sat for at least a year, kind of stewed and in for that length of time. The longer it cooks, the better. I keep using the phrase cook, really, it's just soaking in alcohol. The alcohol is breaking down the elements and creating the mixture. But the longer, the better. There are recipes out there, formulas out there that are 5 year. And I have a few samples with me today. So the first one is one that my Sifu made. It's a little bit that I have left. This is, I think, out of probably about a 1 year batch. Yeah, this one was probably his 1 year batch. It's good. Got me through a lot of basic conditioning. Highly recommend it. Obviously, I can't get it anymore, but that's the kind of that batch. There are some really good jows on the internet that you can get. Sifu Wayne, for those of you who know who Sifu Wayne, writer of the Wing Chun Compendiums Volume 1 and Volume 2, and a number of other really good Wing Chun books, and a contributor to the Wing Chun Illustrated magazine, also makes jow. And this is a bottle of his 1 year formula. I picked it up from Everything Wing Chun. As you can see, this is about the 1 year formula. You can see kind of the heavier elements still in the jar. If I rotate it, you can see them kind of floating around in there still. That's a nice jowl. It's the 1 year formula. Got a bottle of this for myself and a friend of mine he was a karateka and he was doing some conditioning. He knew I used Dit Da for my conditioning and he liked the results I got. So he asked, and I got him a bottle of this. It was very inexpensive, maybe $25, I think, maybe a little less. Um, I also have his 3-year formula. So this is one that's been kind of stewing and cooking for 3 years. As you can see, it is a lot darker. It's a lot thicker. It's been allowed to soak and break down the elements for a lot longer, so it's become a darker, more condensed, stronger liquid. Um, I've used a bit of this one. I really, really like it. It is a highly recommend Dit Da if you're going to doing that for conditioning, um, especially for us Wing Chun people who like to train. I also went with Sifu Wayne's formula when I went to buy some because Sifu Wayne actually had his Dit Da tested, scientifically examined, and he went through a process called, oh, what is it called? Yeah, Chro- chromagnetographic mass spectrum, gas chromatography mass spectrum. Very long scientific word. Again, not a scientist, not a doctor. Uh, GCMS for short, where they examined two samples of Dit Da. They may have examined more, but in the article he wrote for Wing Chun Illustrated, he used a 5-year and a 1-year. In both cases, they found some interesting compounds. Um, the 5-year um, partial list of identified bioactive compounds found in the 5-year included um, basically an element that was an antiseptic, one was a skin conditioner, one was anti-inflammatory, uh, one increased skin elasticity, and one was antibacterial. So all these elements were in there. When you think about, being sweaty, hitting, especially the wall bag, you might get little micro tears and stuff. The Dit Da actually contributed to improving skin conditioning, skin elasticity, and was an antibacterial and antiseptic. So all these kinds of things we think about when we think about healing and cleaning and getting rid of bad germs and stuff. The 5-year formula had those compounds in it. The 1-year didn't have quite as much, but it still contained things that increase blood flow, skin softener, antiseptic, anti-inflammatory, skin conditioning, all the things you would still want out of a decent jowl um, that did all that. They did also test a commercial jowl, and a commercial jowl, again, found antiseptic, antibacterial, these kinds of things within the jowl. So even the commercial ones have a lot of the elements that you want. Um, just buying it off the shelf. And like I said, I used a commercial brand for a very long time, and it worked just fine. So like I said, there are commercial brands, big companies that make them. You can pick those up at local supermarkets. If you happen to are lucky enough to have like a Chinese supermarket near you that specialize in goods from China, they'll usually have a Dit Da, the Korean markets, all those. They usually will have some of those commercial brands. You can pick them up. They're inexpensive, but probably I would say last time I bought one was like maybe $15-$20 a bottle for a good sized bottle of it. Um, if you want a more of a homemade custom Wing Chun specific brand, Sifu Wayne, um, his brand, you can pick those up on everything Wing Chun. You can also pick up Plum Dragon, I believe is the brand, on Amazon now. And they have a bunch of different formulas. And that one's great because you can read reviews and all that, and they have those on there. So you can pick those up there. AJ, I actually think, went with the Plum Dragon, so I'm waiting to hear back what his thoughts were on it. I can't wait to hear back if he enjoyed it, if it's working for him, if he's getting a good results out of using it. I will say this: when you use Dit Da, don't make the mistake of just applying it and then washing it off. It is an external uh, use item. You have to rub it in, massage it in, and let it sit for at least 30 minutes. Let it soak in. Because if you wash it off immediately, you can let it sit and soak, but if after 10 minutes you're washing it off, you're really not getting any of the benefits of it. So you want to like get it, rub it, massage it in, let it soak for at least 30 minutes on your skin, then go ahead and go about taking take a shower or something like that. Now, like I said earlier, if you have a recipe, or if you have a sifu, somebody who taught you how to make dit da, you can make your own dit da. This is one I started about 9 months ago. As you can see, it's still cooking, still got all the herbies and all that in it. It's big old jar of dit da. This recipe I picked up from um, somebody else. They had their whole set pre-ready to go for martial arts training, martial arts related dit da. So I figured, hey, give it a try. I don't quite have easy access to herbs or the herbs I would need, so finding somebody who had a preset pack that I could just pick up and get with a formula that looked good was really convenient. So I got that, and I used a mixture of rice wine and sorghum for this one. So I'm really interested to see what the end result is going to be, um, and we'll know in 3 months or 3 months and 1 year. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to let this one sit for 2 years or just 1 year and crack it open. Right now it's about at the 9 month mark. So I will decide at the 1 year mark if I want to open it up and give it a test. Another kind of caveat to dit das. Based on what my teacher told me, the dit da you get here in the US will never be quite as good as the dit da you can get in either Hong Kong or mainland China. The main reason for that being certain herbs that go into dit da, especially good martial arts related dit da formulas, simply are not available in the US. Whether they are banned by the FDA or just they're very hard to get, there are certain herbs you cannot get in the US to make certain recipes of dit da. Let me caveat that: certain recipes of dit da. There are substitutes that are perfectly fine to use. My sifu said he made his last Hong Kong recipe batch in 1992. Then a handful of the herbs became unavailable in the US. But he said it wasn't a big deal. He knew substitute or alternative herbs that were available that he could use, and he did. His dit das were perfectly fine ever since. Like I said, I used his homemade dit da for quite a bit as well. I only have a little bit left, so I'm trying to preserve it. There are plenty of other really great dit da recipes out there. And if you know somebody in Hong Kong, you can always import dit da. If you know somebody who's willing to somehow mail it to you or provide it, I believe you can get it shipped internationally. There's usually not an issue with that. Not sure about that. Check your local laws on importing dit da. But like I said, you can get perfectly fine dit da recipe here in the U.S. You can make a decent dit da yourself. 6 months to a year for a basic level dit da. I know there are certain, for instance, Japanese recipes. A lot of my karate friends have Japanese dit da recipes that they use and make, and so everybody kind of has their own. It's one of those neat things when you kind of go down the rabbit hole of dit da. Everybody has their own recipe for whatever reason. Oh, if you use this combination of herbs with this percentage of measurement and all that, it makes it much better for this and that. So you can get really kind of lost in the sauce with dit da, but at the end of the day, what is dit da? Dit da is simply an external use mending for bruising, basic bruising and trauma, light trauma, usually related to some type of martial arts training or, as the name implies, fall or hit wine, Dit Da Jau. Bruising, you fall, you hurt yourself, you get a bruise, oh, okay, you rub some dit da on it, massage some dit da on it. It's good. Again, if you're interested in dit da, I would recommend finding a practitioner, local licensed practitioner of Chinese medicine who could kind of go into better detail than I can. I can only really approach it from the Wing Chun standpoint, what I was taught by my Sifu. Um, if you practice Kung Fu and you have a Sifu who does Dit Da, maybe they've shown you Dit Da, how to make Dit Da, how to massage Dit Da. Well, it's relatively common practice among some Kung Fu schools. Um, Mine was, I happened to learn Dit Da, which is part of the process. Uh, so yeah, that's Dit Da, kind of in a nutshell from me, my perspective on it. Um, if you want any Dit Da recommendations, reach out to me. I'd be glad to make them. Like I said, I do recommend Sifu Wayne's. You can pick that up on Everything Wing Chun. If you want to make it yourself, um, there are some pre-packaged recipes you can get out there. Look to see if there's specific types, like, hey, what is it that you do exactly that you want the Dit Da for? Um, See if there's a blend out there that kind of meets that. Or if you're just looking for a general all-purpose martial arts training and conditioning Dit Da, plenty of them out there. You can pick them up relatively cheap. Um, if you have the time, cool. Make some, let it stew in a sealed jar for a year. You'll have your own Dit Da. Like I said, I'm probably going to have plenty of Dit Da out of that one jar right there. Um, and I also have all the other formulas. Which reminds me, applying Dit Da. It's like this bottle. It's a regular little kind of pop cap, and you drizzle it on. Um, thing my Sifu started to do was get the little spray bottles. Like you can get those little $1 spray bottles at Target. You can just go, psh, psh, and then you can rub it, massage it in. I like that the best because it reduced mess, reduced waste from Dit Da. Sometimes trying to pour it just right out of the jar, you spill a little extra and all that. With the spray bottle, you could just spray directly onto the traumatized area, the bruised area, something like that. Give it a nice massage, let it sit. Um, that's a great thing, especially if you get like a bigger bottle and you can kind of divvy it out into the small little spray bottles. The spray bottles are travel size, so if you're going somewhere to train, I know I took some with me when I went on a training trip and I got a really nasty bruise. It was about a big chunk of my forearm. I had my little spray bottle, massaged it in. Less than a I would say a day or two later, that thing was gone. I had applied the Dit Da a couple times. Perfect, problem solved. It's a little those little spray travel size bottles are perfectly fine for Dit Da, especially kind of the ones that have less of the heavy elements. They're broken down more. You can just pour it in straight out. Won't cause any issues. You can get it in the spray bottle just fine. Um, I hope you enjoyed my talk on Dit Da. If you didn't enjoy my talk on Dit Da, I apologize if I misspoke. Um, if you're a practitioner of Chinese medicine and you want to elaborate or you have some tips, throw them up in the comments. Pass it out there. Again, I am not a medical professional. I'm just a dude who uses a lot of Dit Da in his time training Wing Chun. I like it. Um, I think it's useful. There's more kind of evidence and research into how exactly it works and what it does and what it can do and what it can't do. Because there's some, like all things, there's some hokey pokey fairy tales out there that science is slowly being like, hey, let's go ahead and get rid of that. Um, Long story short, Dit Da good, bruising bad. Use the Dit Da. I hope you all enjoyed. I can't wait to do next week's episode with my special guest. I hope you tune into that. Thank you, and happy training, everybody.